There is a particular kind of silence that doesn't feel peaceful. It doesn't feel like rest. It feels like standing in a room where someone used to be, and the air still carries the faint trace of their presence. But when you turn around, there is no one there. That is what spiritual dryness feels like. Not loud doubt, not dramatic crisis, just quiet. Just the absence of what you were certain you once felt. And here is the thing that no one says out loud, but nearly everyone who has walked with God long enough has thought in the dark, in the middle of a prayer that seems to dissolve before it reaches the ceiling. What if I feel nothing? And that means something is terribly wrong. What if the silence is the answer? Most of us were never told that faith could feel like this. We were given stories of burning bushes and audible voices and hearts that were strangely warmed. We were given testimonies of tears during worship and certainty that landed like sunlight. And so when the feeling stops, when the warmth cools, and the music no longer moves you, and the words of Scripture sit flat on the page, like ink on paper, and nothing more, the conclusion seems obvious. Something has gone wrong. God has gone quiet. Or worse, you have gone numb, and numb might mean dead. But what if that entire logic is backwards? What if the feeling was never the thing itself? What if you have spent years measuring the reality of God by the temperature of your own emotional response, and the silence you are experiencing right now is not evidence of His absence, but evidence that you are finally being asked to go deeper than feeling has ever taken you? This is not a comfortable idea. It is not meant to be. Consider Elijah. Not the Elijah who called down fire from heaven. Not the prophet standing in triumph on Mount Carmel, with the prophets of Baal defeated, and the rain finally returning to a parched land. Consider the Elijah who sits under a broom tree in the wilderness the very next day and asks God to take his life. That Elijah, the one who had just seen God move in the most dramatic possible way and still collapsed into despair hours later. The one who had felt so much, so recently, and now felt absolutely nothing except exhaustion and the desire to disappear. God's response to that Elijah is worth sitting with for a long time. He doesn't rebuke him. He doesn't appear in fire. He sends an angel who touches him and says, "Eat, because the journey is too great for you." And when Elijah finally reaches the mountain of God, weak and hollow and spent, God asks him a question that sounds almost unbearably gentle. "What are you doing here, Elijah?" And then, according to 1 Kings 19, God passes by. First a great wind that tears the mountains apart, then an earthquake, then fire. And the text says, quietly, devastatingly, that God wasn't in any of them. After the fire, a still small voice. Some translations say a gentle whisper. Some say the sound of sheer silence, and it is only there, in what cannot be pointed to or measured or felt with certainty, that Elijah hears what he needed to hear. God was not performing for Elijah. He was waiting for him to be still enough to receive something that spectacle could not carry. And maybe that is where you are right now. The noise inside a human life is enormous. Not just the noise of distraction or busyness, though those are real enough. There is another kind of noise, subtler and harder to name. It is the noise of accumulated expectation, the unspoken belief that God should feel a certain way, arrive on a certain schedule, speak in a register your emotions can immediately recognize. Years of that expectation can create a kind of perceptual filter. And when God doesn't come through it, when His presence doesn't match the shape you've prepared for it, the mind reports nothing. But nothing is not the same as absence. A frequency outside the range of human hearing doesn't disappear simply because the ear cannot detect it. Spiritual numbness is rarely the absence of God. It is almost always the exhaustion of the self. And exhaustion misreads everything. When you are depleted, emotionally wrung out by grief or failure, or simply the relentless weight of staying alive in a complicated world, the capacity to feel spiritual warmth diminishes the same way a body hypothermic from cold loses the ability to register temperature. The problem is not the environment. The problem is the condition of the instrument trying to measure it. There is also something else, something harder to say without it sounding like an accusation, which it is not meant to be. Sometimes the dryness comes because we have been consuming faith rather than living it. Reading about God, singing about God, listening to content about God, without the slow, costly work of actual surrender in the ordinary moments of actual life. And when that gap widens, the emotional resonance fades, not because God withdrew, but because something in us turned slightly away without realizing it. Not in rebellion, just in the drift that happens to anyone who stops rowing and wonders why the current is taking them somewhere they didn't choose. Here is what I want to say directly to the fear underneath all of this. You are not broken. The fact that you are troubled by the silence is itself evidence of something alive in you. A truly dead faith does not ache. It does not ask whether God is still there. It simply moves on and builds its life around other things. The ache you are carrying, on that specific longing for a presence you cannot currently feel, but cannot stop wanting, that is not the symptom of someone abandoned. That is the sound of love that has not given up, even when it cannot find its voice. Jesus on the cross cried out Psalm 22 with his last shredded breath, my God, why have you forsaken me?" The Son of God experienced the sensation of divine absence. Let that settle, not as theology to be organized, but as a reality to be stood inside. If even he could feel what you are feeling, then the feeling is not proof of separation. It is proof of being fully human, fully in the dark, and fully still in the story. The silence you are in right now may not be an ending. It may be the particular quality of a room where something is about to begin. Not with trumpets, not with sudden emotional clarity, but with the slow return of something you cannot yet name. A willingness, a turning back, a single honest prayer that asks for nothing except to believe that the distance is not the truth. God does not love you because you feel him. He loved you before you were capable of feeling anything at all. And that love does not require your emotional confirmation to remain entirely, stubbornly, quietly real. The journey is too great for you. So rest, eat, and trust that the voice in the silence is still speaking, even now, in words your exhausted heart has not yet learned to hear.